So we want to welcome everybody that's joining us now. We got Tom and Theodore, Kevin and Doug. Thank you guys for joining us. We're going to wait a little bit till we start. I know.
It is candy cane lady.
That's right. Queen of candy canes. You see our candy cane picture, Kevin?
No, in the background there. Or?
No, we turned one of the conveyors into a candy cane. We had our engineers design the hook on the end, and then we brought it into the service bay and we wrapped it all up with red and white lights, and then we put it out. You can see it from the satellites. It's so big out there.
Get out of here, really?
Yeah. I'll have to send you the picture.
Yeah, please do. That'd be something to see. Can't say I've seen something like that.
Yeah, that was Justin Malotte's idea to make it into a candy cane, have the hook on the end. It was brilliant.
That's smart marketing, right?
Yeah, I know. We have people strolling in for the lunch hour. Hope everybody out there is enjoying your lunch too.
Only had 64, so take it easy on the first trip.
Okay, Dad.
I got 3.
I
I was good. Yeah.
Hey, Todd, welcome. Hey, Ronnie, welcome aboard.
Uncomfortable today, Lindsay?
What's that?
Uncomfortable today?
You know,
The outfit.
it's a lovely.
I'm wearing jeans.
I just got like.
I was like, you know.
I actually threw a t-shirt on, jacket, and then I was like, oh, let's learn, you can't.
Rich, are you muted on your end?
Can you hear me?
There we go. We're good to go. Yes, welcome aboard. How are you?
Good. Can Kevin hear me?
Yep.
Yes, I can. How are you, Rich?
Great. How you doing today, Kev?
I'm doing well. Feeling not as 100% this time around as I can. So,
Well, good. Hope your family's well.
yeah, and I was just sharing. It seems like with daycares and stuff, it's just like a revolving door. You've been there, right? So,
Oh yeah.
yeah, this time of year is just tough, but doing well today. So today's a good day.
Well, thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry it's been difficult to get it all lined up, and Kim has done a great job with working with you. So appreciate that.
No, this will be a lot of fun. Seems like you guys are doing a good program there every other week.
Yeah, we're trying to give opportunities for training, and it could be in applications, it could be in some accounting function, it could be in marketing, customer service. Something we're trying to lend training opportunities every Friday between 11 and 1. So we call it our lunch and learn.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
We
You
have
guys-
outside speakers, and as well as people within our organization that are experts in their field or area, and so we have them come out and present every week.
Yeah, well, I was just talking just a few minutes ago too about Mellott University a little bit, and maybe doing a little story on that, just some of the developments there. So I don't know if that's been part of the lunch and learn activity too, but yeah, from Pit and Quarry standpoint, it seems like you guys are always doing good things there.
Yeah, hold on just a second.
Yeah.
Someone dropping off my Pit Quarry Magazine.
Oh yeah, there you go. Is that the December issue?
I don't know. This might be a little old.
Yeah.
I don't think we have I don't think I have the latest.
Yeah, the latest one, it should be mailing out. We're already working on our January issue as we speak. So they're always like 4 to 6 weeks ahead. January is tough though, because it's from ad front, we're getting into new campaigns, and not everybody's got their plans ready. So trying to work with our printer a little bit to get things pushed down a little bit.
Is this a busy time of year for you?
It's a busy
End of
time
year?
from my side, the content side. I feel like it's busy because we're planning for our roundtable for a Hall of Fame, doing the magazine on top of it. The first quarter's got a lot of meetings. It's meeting heavy. I think it slows down for our industry, but for us, we go to a lot of the state shows. We do SME, ISEE, the drilling blasting show. I'm going up to Ontario. So yeah, I mean, it's busy. Actually, it's nice in the spring and summer for us. Our readers typically, that's when they get busy, but that's kind of when things slow down a little bit, and then I can get out and visit with people, which is, it's a good balance for the year.
Yeah, it's great to get out there every week and go see customers. That's what we try to emphasize in our organization. Get out and find out what's going on.
Yeah.
You learn something every day.
Yeah. Be part of the industry too,
Yes.
That's how you get some of your best insights on what's happening out there, just being out there.
How many years have you been in the industry now?
This is my 11th, which is kind of hard to believe.
Goes by fast.
Yeah, well, you've had more than 11, right, Rich? What are you on now?
Yeah. I think I'm on 30, 34.
34?
33.
Yeah. Well, you probably heard this too, and I believe it. Like, once you're in the aggregates industry, you put 5, 7 good years in, you're probably not going anywhere. So
No.
that's my plan. I'd love to get to 34. I think that'd be awesome. That'd be a good life and a good career. So
Yeah. Start young and end old.
yeah, I mean, you see a lot of people, switching job. Like years ago, I read a report about people switching jobs. Like, the average person has 6 jobs in their career. I mean, 6 jobs seems like a lot if you're talking about a career.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, you value stability. There's opportunities with our industry.
I just wanted to, thank you for sharing an hour of your time today with our team and others. We're so excited about this finishing up this year and getting into next year. The business opportunities are off the charts for our business, and it's so exciting, especially to be back in Ag 1 in Nashville. I think that by far, outside of Vegas, that's been the best venue, for our customers, for our people, to enjoy the town and enjoy what the town has to offer. And then this year, we're real super excited about it because we have a lot of new partners, and we have one partner in specifics, Southern Machinery, led by Abby Blankenship, is 15 minutes outside of the city, and then we have another group of our partners, whether it's North Carolina with Marion Machine, Florida with Cast Rock. We're fortunate to have a lot of great people to work with. We're really excited with our friends in Georgia, the Norex group, which is led by the Glaze family. They've just been super fun to work with, and really take care of their customers. That's what their main focus is. So we're really blessed to have such a great team and family. That's what I like to talk about, teamwork and family. People get tired of me saying it, but that's what I believe in, and I think that that's important. I think the one thing that we're most important to us and is dear to our heart is our team. We're so proud of the fact that we build things. We manufacture, we fabricate, we go out every week to provide service, and we have good paying jobs that allow families to flourish, and you don't see that today in many cases. So we have upwards of 400 great people within our organization that we're moving towards, and we're just so happy that within the community, people know every one of our businesses and what it means to be in this industry. So we're trying to educate. Now we're starting in the elementary schools, and we're working up to the junior high school and high schools in each of the regions to try to let people know what we're all about and what our industry is all about. And so it's something that's near and dear to every one of our families, the Mellotts, that are involved in our business, as well as Glaze and Blankenship and the people at Marion. It's they're long standing businesses that have been around for we're on 103 years. So if you ask probably any of the leadership within any of our organizations, they'll tell you that the family is the most important piece, and the fact that we actually are building and fabricating and engineering and designing the equipment to add value for our customers. So tell me a little bit about this the state of the aggregates industry. What I know you've been traveling around. You got opportunity to travel down to South Carolina to present. I think you presented on innovation and what you're seeing out there. But I thought maybe you could share some of that with our team.
Yeah, Rachel, I appreciate the introduction. Yeah, I'll dive into my state of the industry report now. Make sure you guys can see my screen and everything. How's that looking, Rich and everybody?
Looks great.
All right. Yeah, I did have the opportunity to go down to South Carolina. Well, and it was great events. Nice growing organization down there. I know, as you kind of referenced there, Rich, there's some opportunity that Mellott sees in the Southeast. So that's a nice growing organization. I think they had 350 people at that meeting, which for an organization that didn't even exist 3+ years ago, that's a good story for our industry. At Pit Quarry, Rich, we keep tabs on a few different core areas of our industry, and anybody who gets the magazine, knows that we're the authority on equipment and technology. We're presenting some of the latest equipment that comes out there, and with this being a ConExpo ConAg year, we saw some expedited development on a few different fronts that I'll get into a little bit here today. If you don't know the history of our magazine, I think knowing the history a little bit might help provide some context to some of the things that I talk about. But just like Mellott, in its long history, Pit Quarry's been around 107 years now as a magazine, and we celebrated our 100th anniversary in 2016, and before that we were a handbook. Some of you might even have an old handbook from the turn of the century, where we basically were educating readers or quarrymen about how to run an operation, how to break rock, with some of the most the primitive stuff of the early years of aggregates. So eventually, leadership of the brand realized there's more to this, more potential there than a magazine, and we morphed into monthly publication, and that's what we've been for 107 years. It's been interesting too to see how our readership's kind of changed, because print, you think about what's happening with print out there. I'm a newspaper guy by it's just my background. I remember reading the paper growing up all the time, and I feel like newspapers have really kind of struggled, and we've seen so many go away. But trade publications, Pit Quarry included, and many others out there, I feel like they've got a niche audience, that values specific content, and our audience on Pit Quarry still very much values print. That's why you see Pit Quarry out and about, at your office and your customer sites. In the industry, our audience too, we recognize that it's been changing, and that digital's here and it's not going anywhere. That's why I've got a new podcast now. Much of our readership too receives our digital products, whether it's our e-newsletters or the magazine digitally. So we're evolving, just like Mellott's evolving, and it's been an interesting year for our industry, to say the least. It's been a pretty good year for our industry, to say the least, as well. Just to kind of look back at maybe where we were, to understand why things are good, or why people feel good, or at least cautiously optimistic today. Agri production is a really good place, historically speaking. Look back to some of the pre-Great Recession years, and we were approaching 1.5 billion metric tons of aggregates as an industry in terms of output by producers across the U.S. At the Great Recession, we saw those numbers really dip in 08, 09. They really took a hit. I mean, 35% losses in terms of production. And we're not all the way back to where we were in 06, 07, but it's been a slow and steady gain for our industry. I think we peaked over a 15-year period last year. And what we've seen this year is that aggregate production's actually dipped a little bit. I'll get a little bit more into that here in a bit, but all in all, aggregate production is in a really good place. Our readers are busy. Your customers are busy. Mellott is busy. So it's relatively good where production is at this point in time. Inflation, that's been a huge storyline this year. It was last year as well, and we've seen producers adjust as months and quarters have gone on. Still a factor. It's going to be in 24, but we've seen, at least on the producer front, some adjustments with good pricing gains that have helped kind of offset some of the dips that we've seen in crushed stone, sand, and gravel volumes this year. And then what's fueling demand is that's something that we're continuously keeping tabs on. I think we're pretty strong on the infrastructure front right now, seeing good support for roads, bridges, and highways. Seeing some change take place on the residential front in terms of the nature of what's driving activity, single family or multifamily, and non-residential is kind of a wild card right now because everything that's not infrastructure or non-building is, I guess we'd call it on Pit and Quarry, or everything that's not residential kind of falls into the non-residential category, and that one's been a little bit more volatile of late, but some things are helping to keep that moving forward. Again, I'll get a little bit more into that in the coming slides, but the supply chain too. When I think back, pre-COVID, pre-2020, I don't remember us telling supply chain stories like we have in recent years, especially in 2020 and 21. But we've seen some improvements there, good adjustments all along the supply chain, understanding what's happening. And manufacturers, dealers, and producers have made better adjustments. They're planning better today. So maybe not the storyline that it was, but something that we're continuously keeping tabs on as an industry. But just to dive a little bit more in depth into some of the things that I'm talking about, some of these trends. It's not great when you see that aggregate production numbers are dipping, and in the way that Pit and Quarry is keeping tabs on where production is at is through the U.S. Geological Survey, or USGS. And so going into the fourth quarter last year, we saw slow but steady gains for our industry in terms of crushed stone, sand, and gravel production. Year over year, that was kind of the storyline. And then you get to the fourth quarter last year, and we dipped a little bit. We dipped 7%. That's kind of a big mark, a big single-digit mark for dip. But we saw more of that in the first quarter, as well as that carrying into the second quarter. And I don't have the third quarter numbers on the slide here, but since I prepared this PowerPoint, USGS did come out with their latest numbers on the third quarter. And so now we have 4 quarters in a row where we've seen aggregate production numbers dip. And crushed stone in Q3 was down 3%. Sand and gravel was down 4%. So we've got a year here, or 4 consecutive quarters, where we've seen some slippage. And I don't know that we're going to see that turn around in the first quarter, or the fourth quarter rather, because we don't have those numbers yet. I think it might be more of the same, but again, we're operating at 15-year highs, peak periods, and the storyline here is still pretty positive. Crushed stone's been performing a little bit better than sand and gravel of late, but obviously I'd like to see those numbers turn around. And just another way to kind of look at where things are with crushed stone production. You can see again how we peaked in 2006. We're making really good gains, and then that monster recession happened. We saw the industry struggle for a period there until we got to a point where we were able to make some slow and steady gains, kind of topping off. And in 2021 they're getting to 1.5 billion metric tons, and saw that slip in 22, and for sure we're going to see that number dip below 1.5 billion in 23. But again, when you think relative to where we were in the mid 2010s, we're still at a really good point. and I'm sure you guys are talking to your customers and, your partners out there in the industry. I feel like if you talk to anybody out there who says, they're really struggling or their production, they can't keep their plants busy, then they must be doing something wrong. That sentiment I've heard, the last year or two. There's plenty out there for everybody to be had. Maybe we're not seeing some of the peak production years that we've had, but all in all, things are pretty good. And it's interesting as you look at the sand and gravel curve, going back to the crushed stone curve there for the last 20 years. It's very much the same storyline in terms of that dip with the recession and trying to crawl back to where we were, in the mid 2000s. So with some of the money that we're putting out there on the infrastructure side, federally, and we're seeing states beef up their programs as well. You think that there's potential to kind of get back to that all-time high number for sand and gravel. Same with crushed stone. So the potential is there. I mean, our industry is certainly, I think you could argue, undervalued. Population's growing. See some markets really taking off across the country. All the way around. If you form a U around the bottom half of the United States, those coastal markets, seem to be some of the strongest. Saw a report the other day from the National Association of Realtors, which talked about, Austin, Texas being really the number one growth market right now. So the opportunities in key markets are plentiful, and we see some really taking off around the country and in certain areas. Yeah, talked about pricing too. Inflation, obviously, as I said, has kind of been a storyline for us for a couple of years here, and it's been one that our readers have had to manage in different ways, and costs certainly have been tough. You could argue it's number one storyline for 2023 is we're covering things on Pit Quarry, but the public producers, at least, they've shared some numbers on how they've managed through inflation. And again, while the volumes of some of the top companies in our industry have dipped, that being Vulcan, number one company, Martin Marietta, number two, and Summit's another one, top producing company that, these are some of the companies that have made really, really good gains quarter over quarter with their aggregate pricing, upwards of like 20 to 22% quarter over quarter. And I was at the South Carolina Association show, as Rich mentioned at the top of the call here, and I asked Tom Hill a question. Tom Hill being from Vulcan Materials, just about pricing trends, and he wasn't ready to answer the question, but the way he answered my question, kind of talking about pricing as a trend, made me believe that we're probably going to see more of that at the top of the year, not just from Vulcan, but from other companies, because costs continue to be something that need to be combated. I think when I reflect about when this started, I guess a couple of things come to mind. I've heard sentiments from producers that our industry didn't do a very good job for a number of years elevating their prices. So I guess you could argue what we're seeing now is that they've been elevated significantly, in tandem with what's happening with inflation. And then just a conversation I had earlier this year with Steve Zelnick, who's the former chairman and CEO of Martin Marietta. He kind of put it a little bit more plainly to me in terms of what's happening with aggregate pricing around the country. When you think about the challenge that our industry has, greenfielding quarries, and that reserves might be getting a little bit tighter, or available construction materials and markets are getting a little bit more limited. Well, it's only a matter of time, and it's not surprising then when you think that maybe materials are a little bit more constrained to get out in the market, and with the supply being a little bit more constrained, there's a little bit more wiggle room on price. So that's from Steve Zelnick of now Site Supply, the former chairman and CEO of Martin Marietta. Looking a little bit more in depth at some of the markets that are fueling aggregate demand. Non-building. When we say non-building at Pit and Quarry, we're talking about roads, bridges, highways. That's the number one driver, the number one thing that's fueling aggregates. That's your IIJA funding. That's your state funding that that's getting out there and supporting the big infrastructure jobs. That's really been strong here in 2023. Again, I guess I keep going back to South Carolina. where I was just a week and a half ago. And again, Tom Hill from Vulcan was the keynote, and he kind of, again, rather plainly spelled out what's happening with IIJA. That's a bill that we saw come forward federally in November of 21, and at Pit Quarry, and I've heard industry stakeholders for a while there following November of 21 just wonder, when is that money going to get out? Well, now it's getting out. We're into really the second full year of IIJA, and I've been with the magazine for 11 years, and this is I guess the second bill that I've been a part of, or the second big one. And it just takes time for that money to get out. It's finally getting out, and the way Vulcan Sill kind of spelled it out for everybody at the South Carolina meeting essentially was that we're going to have 5 years of runway, starting here, in 23, and essentially we're going to get into 2027 with good IIJA funding. And ideally, you think about that bill passing in 21. Well, maybe in 2026 we can get another 5-year bill or another multi-year bill going. So really good runway forward when you think about 2024 and 25 and the coming years. And if we can avoid a continuing resolution toward the back half of this decade, federally get another 5-year bill forward and convey the value of construction materials, the value of infrastructure, I think that's going to bode well for our industry. When I say that we're undervalued, I think too about studies like the American Society of Civil Engineers, or ASCE, and they've graded American infrastructure for years now, and I think they come out with a report every 4 years. And their most recent one, I think, gave infrastructure in our country either a D+ or a C-. So, you see these reports about the status of bridges and deteriorating infrastructure nationwide. Well, now's the time to invest. Healthy economy is totally tied into a strong infrastructure network, and ours, if you go by what the ASCE is regularly talking about or promoting, and ours is in dire need of repair. So again, if we can convey that to our decision makers in Washington and in our state capitals, that's going to bode well. And non-building should be a good category for us going forward. I think the more volatile categories, the ones to watch, harder to predict are residential and non-residential. Residential has already undergone some change this decade, because if you think back to 20 and 21, in those years, you saw single family really take off. People were buying and selling homes, within 24 hours. I think there's still some good demand there on the single family front, but multifamily kind of took over the last year or two as like the new construction start driver for the residential construction market. I think it's going to be interesting what happens in 2024. Looking back, or again, I referenced the National Association of Realtors. They just came out with a forecast that kind of is expecting single family to be the driver again in the new year for residential. I think they were talking about 1.4 million new starts. And again, when you think about certain markets, because Aggregates is local, so locally served, we're so locally serving markets. It's a kind of a matter of where you are and what the demand is. But we're underserved on the residential front, and I'm expecting that single family will probably take over as we're seeing this teeter-totter kind of take place with residential construction. And just like residential, non-residential's been an interesting story this decade, because warehousing really took off with the COVID years. E-commerce was already in place, and it was accelerated with the pandemic. So that was putting a lot of construction in place with Amazon and Walmart making preparations. And kind of what happened the last year and a half is Amazon said, we're done building warehouses. Like, we have our infrastructure in place around this country. We saw data centers really take off early this decade as well. Those are high aggregate intensive, high concrete intensive projects. And those kind of have slowed a bit as well. I think what's kind of taken the place, and non-residential has dipped just like residential has this year, but kind of what's holding non-residential up right now, I think, is manufacturing. Legislation's helping that. We've seen some investments, not just our industry, but nationwide, with putting new manufacturing plants or expanded plants in place. So
We'd like to
non-residential-
see more of that. We'd like
right?
to see more government sponsorship as far as the bonus accelerated depreciation opportunities. We and our customers were investing in that for years, and now it's up in the air what's going to happen here moving forward.
Yeah, I don't want to get too political too, although I think most people in our industry, think along similar lines. But you think about the last 40 years and kind of what's happened with, the U.S. losing industry to overseas to China, and yeah, it's been a good story seeing the CHIPS Act come on, understanding that we're having the problem sourcing microchips, which are essential to so much stuff now that are equipment technology rich. So I think you'll probably see more incentive, or I would anticipate more incentive to bring manufacturing home. So something to certainly keep an eye on, and just the idea too with the supply chain. I think that realization to have things more locally centered, closer to home, closer to the end market. I think that's kind of been a reminder and awakening for companies that a more locally sourced supply chain, there's certainly good value in that.
We're definitely seeing that aspect. The people aren't going to wait for a year for product. So we're trying to increase our inventories to have it local, whether it's equipment or parts. So that's something that's super important to us to make sure that we can supply everything that the customers need in our markets, as opposed to waiting for something outside of the country.
Yeah, you're certainly right. I think you hit on the key term. It's inventory, and they're just talking to dealers or the last couple of years, understanding what happened with the supply chain. If you don't have it, Rich, you can't sell it. And historically, I know dealers and your customers too. They want to be careful with how much they have on hand, because there's a lot of cost tied into that. But I do think there's been this understanding and more willingness to inventory, have things on hand, and knowing just kind of what we experienced 3 or 4 years ago, to make sure that the market can be served effectively. Just to kind of wrap up what I was talking about with these certain markets too. If you look at the bottom half of that graphic on the left, that's from Dodge Construction Network, and it kind of shows through 10 months of this year, what's happening with new builds in the core 3 markets that aggregates are a part of. And I guess through 10 months this year, residential starts are down this year 15%, and non-residential is down 7%. But we see a strong non-building, kind of keep the whole construction sector afloat, up 20% through majority of the year, and that all equates to us down about 4%. And still, I mean, it's a good thing we have that infrastructure funding behind us, and then some many states understanding that they need to elevate their funding to upkeep their infrastructure network statewide. It talks about us as a magazine covering technology. We also cover safety, but business is an area that our readers have told us, and just through metrics in terms of what people are clicking on, what people are engaging with us. It seems like anytime there's a business deal or a merger or acquisition, it seems like our readers are gravitating toward that sort of content. Anytime Vulcan is acquiring somebody or Martin Marietta, that's of interest. Those headlines drive clicks for us digitally, at least. I'd say overall, what's happened with M&A this year, it's been a little bit slower than what we've seen in recent years, at least on the producer front. We haven't really seen that big aggregates deal take place like we saw a couple of years ago with Lehigh Hansen and its Western assets and Martin Marietta, and Vulcan acquired U.S. Concrete a couple of years back. That sort of deal involving a lot of aggregates facilities hasn't transpired here in 23. And really, there wasn't a lot of big deal-making activity on the construction materials front for the first 8 or 9 months of the year. But then, we got into the fall, and all of a sudden, we saw Summit Materials drop this announcement that they were acquiring Argos's USA facilities. That's a deal exceeding $3 billion, and it's more so on the cement front. But just a reminder, I guess, that there's, even though it's a trickier environment to do some deal making today, the cost of money is a little bit more expensive. we see some bullish activity there on the construction materials front, with Summit basically saying that, they see cement as really a growth market, and they're looking to strengthen their cement assets here in the U.S. And again, not so much on the aggregate front, but where you see those bullet points with CRH, Martin Marietta, and CRM and Vulcan, they're more so on the ready mix concrete front with, Martin offloading some sites to CRH in Texas. Again, another big deal. I mean, $2 billion in excess of, and we didn't get a price tag on the SRM Vulcan deal, but that's one that involves a lot of facilities. And I think kind of the storyline there between Vulcan and Martin Marietta is that they're offloading some ready mix assets, and their strength, their core is really in aggregate. So again, probably putting more of the onus on where they're strongest as operators, again, as aggregates. Bolt-on activity, seeing that continue. I mean, that's more, you've got a Vulcan, for example, or a Summit in a market, and they're just adding, a mom and pop sort of deal. Like those sorts of deals have continued to transpire, but the platform ones, or the mega deal where you're acquiring somebody's everything, in a huge swath of territory. We haven't really seen that transpire this year. And, with 24 being a presidential election year, and, coming around the turn here with a new year, and maybe a little bit of uncertainty or some caution or hesitancy. I don't know if we're going to see that sort of big deal take place. I think it could possibly transpire, but if I was going to venture a guess, I would say maybe 25 is the next year where we see, that next aggregate centric deal take place with one of the big producers on the aggregate side. Supply chain and CapEx. It's an area that, when I think about 24 in the new year, thinking back 4 years ago, I feel like the pandemic kind of dried up some CapEx. Maybe not so much the election, but I think every 4 years, people just get a little bit more cautious, and it's going to be, I'm curious from my seat what transpires. I think our industry is healthy. I think people are putting projects in the pipeline. They're placing orders. I would anticipate that's going to continue into 24, but it's just always something to keep an eye on, is one global event or one event could change people's thinking. Again, noticeable improvements in the supply chain, not perfect, still some holes there. Some with bearings, I suppose, for instance. I've heard reports that fabricators haven't necessarily resurrected or perfected their supply chain, so like to see some improvements there. Some lead times, I guess, depending on manufacturers, are already going into 25 or deeper into 25. I guess that's just where we are. But interesting, Rich, hearing from you too, just about trying to get things out as soon as you can, and trying to make investments to serve customers adeptly and quickly. But we were operating in this just-in-time strategy, or this just-in-time approach for a number of years, and it seemed like that was the wave of the future. Coming into 2020, and then with the pandemic, we saw everybody kind of rethink what works, and I think planning and preparation, and maybe inventorying a little bit more, working with producers to make sure that vendors are aware of projects that are going to be coming. The placement of orders and when that's happening in the year is a little bit different. And I think people used to get away with getting into late summer, fall, placing orders, and now if you talk to vendors, it's this, they want to know now. I mean, they want to know as soon as you have an idea, or you're thinking about placing an order. So I think everyone's, for the most part, really adjusted with the new operating environment, with equipment and technology, ordering and placing orders. I'm not sure we're going to go back to that just in time anytime soon.
We're seeing a challenge in people. It's we have plenty of capacity that we could add if we could find more people, and the same from the front end work that has to be done, the engineering aspect of any of these large CapEx projects requires a team, and you have to have enough people that are able to add value to it, to be able to put that product into the shops so that they can manufacture it. So we're trying to work with people really in this, 2-year window, upwards of 30 or 40 weeks on the front end from an engineering standpoint, and then from a fabrication standpoint on the back end. So it's a challenge to balance all of that. And it's a lot of it is, regionally, depending on which area or what market you're in. But we're continuing to see people want to invest. Our customers want to invest in the areas that are best served for them. And it's not the rural areas; it's the areas outlining some of the metropolitan cities that are expanding into the suburbs. So I think that will continue through 2023, 24, 24 and 25.
Yeah, I think people's the key, Rich. In our industry has been talking about this for a long time. At our roundtable every year, I feel like we're talking about our labor shortage, and for years and years, it seemed like we were talking about the problem, and we weren't really talking about solutions. And I feel like the last year or two, we're seeing more action there on our industry's front to kind of find solutions. Even talking before this call, you were sharing about reaching out to elementary school students and training people and investing in people, investing in your markets, and I think our industry has a huge opportunity, and it's not just for the supply chain. I think it's for everything. I think if we want to get aggregate production where we need it to be, we need to have more people. We need to have good people. So I think really maybe the number one opportunity for our industry is to promote the awesome things that we do, the necessity or the essential nature of our products and the equipment that supports it. So it's good that we're starting to see some traction, some real world success stories, reaching out to communities, reaching out to trade schools, building up some programs, not just to address the supply chain, but obviously we need people, all along, that to make sure that we're getting equipment out the door expeditedly to the customers who need it, who are, waiting for it. So hopefully we'll see that trend continue. On the technology front, I think maybe I touched on trends a little bit or just brushed on them, but I did, as Rich mentioned at one point, I'm not sure it was on the call, but I recently gave a presentation at the South Carolina Aggregates Association's workshop, about innovation in quarry and plant technology, and with this being a ConExpo ConAg year, the way I go about covering ConExpo is, as a member of the trade press, is there's press conferences, and then we'll set up appointments to talk with vendors about the things that they're developing, whether it's equipment or technology supporting equipment. And it seemed this year, like as I was going from booth to booth or press conference to press conference, that it was like one or two themes that were emerging. It was that we're seeing more equipment being outfitted with technology or sensors. So this trend of digitalization, or I really hate the term Internet of Things. It just seems like a fancy way of saying that we're getting more information or extracting more details and insights out of our equipment. But the equipment's getting more intelligent. So it's been a huge trend. Not just at ConExpo, but the last couple of years we've seen really good strides being made there. And then I think the other trend, not just the show, but the last 2 years, I would say, really some acceleration with sustainability. Sustainability means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but I guess from a technology standpoint, just thinking about the show this year and maybe the direction that equipment is going to be going, it's going to be going in a more sustainable direction or path. Our industry needs diesel equipment as we're constructed right now. We need diesel to perform, to do our jobs. So it was interesting to hear this year and at ConExpo, and then after the fact that there were same manufacturers look at hybrid equipment, like diesel electric hybrids. We're looking at purely electric equipment to process rolling stock, or to power rolling stock and power our aggregate processing plants. And it's not just electric, I guess, because as I heard from Rod Schrader of Komatsu at the show, and as we've seen with some recent announcements from Komatsu and Caterpillar, electric seems to be all the rage right now. We certainly see that on the on-road front, with Tesla and trying to get the U.S. or certain states all electric with on-road vehicles by certain years. I think even just a few days back, I saw a report about the state of Michigan and how their governor Gretchen Whitmer wants to have all the the state of Michigan's vehicles as electric by the year 2033. So, we're seeing some really aggressive mandates being put in place by entities for the on-road. And I think what's happening is that manufacturers in our industry, manufacturers nationwide, they recognize that this stuff is going out in the on-road environment. It's already starting to come into our world a little bit, and these pressures are certainly gonna appear as real world mandates in aggregates and mining, to make sure that we're getting to net zero carbon emissions, as industries. So we've seen a lot of activity there in terms of developing equipment or announcements that companies are trying to go that route. Not necessarily sure that the end users or the market's ready for that, but I think mandates or regulation may dictate that the end users, get there at a certain point.
We're trying to get the manufacturers to pump the brakes a little bit. The fact that if you have a switch or some type of control on a piece of equipment and that goes down and you don't have that piece or that part, you could be down for hours, days, or weeks. People now are measuring downtime in minutes, not hours or weeks. So it's really something that everyone wants to talk about. It's the new fab. It's one of my friends bought an electric vehicle and the car got banged up and the car was sitting for 8 months because he couldn't get a part. So we don't want to be that. So whatever people are heading in that direction, we actually want to head in the other direction that's more reasonable. We don't have people that are trained to be able to operate some of this or be able to switch things out or change things. So it becomes a real challenge. But I see globally, why everyone wants to do it. But we want to do it in a manner that's practical and people understand what downtime means. Downtime means minutes and seconds. It doesn't mean hours or days.
Yeah, it has to perform. It can't be this theoretical idea that is checking boxes that regulators are trying to to self-serve themselves. I mean, it has to be real world applicable. It's interesting you mentioned the Tesla example, Rich, because the owner of Pit Quarry was in my office the other day and he was showing me his phone and he had the Wall Street Journal's website up and the top headline was talking about some government mandate to get all these vehicles to electric by a certain year. And then the headline right below that was how Tesla had recalled 2 million vehicles because of some sort of safety issue. So, I mean, again, see all this aggressiveness on the front end of the supply chain or whatever you want to call that. But if you're going to push it out the front door, yeah, again, it has to perform. Yeah, to your point about training too, that's a whole component too that needs to be addressed. We talk about having people, or trying to find people and get them to understand the equipment, to work on the equipment, maintain the equipment. That will take a whole totally different mindset and approach to get somebody to tend to that sort of powered equipment. So I think we're still at the front end of this whole change. It sure seems like eventually the change is going to be real. I don't know how many years that's going to be, but again, we're seeing manufacturers really start to press this a little bit. Caterpillar is another example of doing this. They have a pilot project they're doing with their C13 engine, which is utilized on rock crushers and screeners, in addition to agricultural equipment and some other stuff. But so their C13, they're looking at how they can power that with hydrogen. And then what they've shared is that there might be potential there for natural gas. So again, if you're a real world end user now, that doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense. But again, we're seeing the front end of this really start to try to move the ball a little bit and see what the possibilities are. But you gotta walk before you run, for sure, Rich. Digitalization. When I think about this, I guess I use ConExpos as kind of inflection points for where we've been as an industry, because 2 or 3 ConExpos ago, I feel like maybe the trend was digital, but what happened was we saw a lot of manufacturers come out with products that support tech products that came out in support of their equipment, whether it was a rock crusher or whether it was a piece of yellow iron. So we had all this intelligence for the first time about our equipment, and what the end market essentially went back to the vendors with was, this is interesting and potentially of use, but you're putting so much information out there. The products that are coming out aren't necessarily the most user-friendly. I need to know about these 10 metrics. I need to know when something's being overpressured or overheating. I don't need to know all these data points, even though you can capture them. That's not necessarily of use. So I think kind of what happened again over another ConExpo or two, what we saw this year is that we saw some technology offerings become a little bit more refined. And so essentially the products that are out there, the products out there in support of the equipment, they're a little bit more user-friendly. The users of the equipment are a little bit more able to react. If something is going down or if there's some sort of alert, something needs tended to, and they can operate a little bit more efficiently, maybe from the cab of their equipment, and don't have to necessarily react to all this data or this data overload that was bogging people down when the technology first came around. And I think
you still need a switch. You still need something that's going to be able to operate in freezing weather or heat or dust or vibration. That's all things that we work in every day. And it's great that we have this device that we can look at and tell you, oh, the machine's down. But you've already probably received 4 phone calls from other people telling you the machine's down. And then the question is, how do you get the machine back up and running? It's still going to take a person to be able to take that resistor, that switch, that's something that doesn't operate well within the heat or the vibration or the dust. So we got to get to that point.
Yeah. Interesting segue too, because with autonomy, on the surface, you would think we're eliminating jobs or we're eliminating people. I think that is far from the case, Rich. Same applies to what you're talking about with plants. I mean, we're always going to need people unless something comes of age, with the robots or, machines tending to our equipment. But I don't know that that's necessarily coming in the next 50 to 100 years. But interesting what's developed within aggregates this year on the autonomy front. As we saw at the very start of this year, Caterpillar and Luckstone announced that they're going to pursue autonomous hauling for aggregates. One of the more interesting stories I've seen come forward in 2023, and I was at the CES show in Vegas. That's the Consumer Electronics Show in January. And Caterpillar and Luckstone at the show, they were talking about a little bit about what's happened with autonomy in mining. So Caterpillar, for an example, they put out over 580 autonomous haulers in mine sites around the world, up until January of 23. We're probably exceeding 600, 700 at this stage, but to date, we haven't really gotten there with aggregates. I guess there's probably a couple of reasons for that, but what Luckstone and Cat are trying to do is essentially figure out, well, how do we take Cat's MineStar for command technology? How do we outfit that onto a typical haul truck? Or maybe not a typical haul truck, but a haul truck of the larger capacity that would operate in a aggregate environment. So 777Gs, 100-ton haulers is what they're working with for Cat. And they're going to try to figure out how this can actually work and perform in a real-world operating environment. In Virginia, they're going to start in 2024 with the Bull Run plant, outfitting the plants, the landscape with the networking infrastructure that needs to be in place for autonomous haulers to perform. But I think maybe the biggest challenge that Luck and Cat have, and anybody that's going to pursue autonomy for aggregates, is it's a much more dynamic operating environment than a copper mine, for example. And you think about a huge, when we think about aggregates, I mean, we live and breathe that, every day. But there's equipment, if you go out to Mine Expo, or I'm sure some of you have seen it at some point. I mean, it's just amazing how it dwarfs aggregate type equipment in size. So the nature of a typical mine site too would be a lot different. Longer hauls in some cases, maybe miles long in some cases. So to take that autonomous technology in a mining environment, it's a little bit simpler versus aggregates where you've got, customer trucks coming in to a smaller footprint. You got a water truck, you got, dealers and people, kind of running around the plant a little bit. So there's a lot more variables to take into account, but Lux Stone, it's a company that's always been kind of pushing innovation a little bit in its 100 years. They're celebrating their 100th anniversary this year. So, as Charlie Lux says in that quote at the bottom, historically, his company, and his father and his grandfather before him, they've been curious about the things they don't know. Our industry hasn't historically been one that has changed a whole lot. If we can get there with autonomy, that would be a tremendous change, or probably one of the greater changes we've had for our industry's history. I think the other interesting thing that I'm going to keep an eye on too is, even if you can prove the viability of autonomous hauling in an aggregate environment, can you commercialize that vehicle, or is there enough buy-in from other companies that would operate 100-ton haulers in their facilities? Is there enough buy-in to actually make it a commercial product? That I don't know. So it's something to keep an eye on. So one, I guess, can they prove the technology? At Lux Stone's Bull Run plant, something to keep an eye on. And if they do, maybe it works, but are other producers going to buy in?
I've heard a lot of people talking about it, and if anyone can do it, Lux can do it. And I've heard people say, if Lux is able to perfect this, and that technology is available, we're going to move towards that as well. So you're hearing a lot of good positive feedback on this project.
Yeah, it's certainly one of the more exciting things I think I've seen come forward in my 11 years with the magazine, Rich. Even last week, or I guess it was the week before, South Carolina Aggregates meeting, Tom Hill was talking about, he actually brought AI forward as a topic, unprompted, and autonomy. And he mentioned, or maybe I'm just kind of paraphrasing, or this is my takeaway from what he said, but I thought he would be a little bit more open to it or intrigued, but he was falling back on safety. He's concerned about what the safety ramifications of running autonomous haulers in a dynamic aggregate environment are. I think everybody, of course, Lux Stone included, that's paramount. I mean, that's priority number one. We need to figure out how to do this safely. If we can't do it safely, we can't do it. But yeah, I think if we could prove the viability, and if we can show the cost, there's cost value there. You probably get a Vulcan to buy in, and you'll get the other companies to buy in. And if we can scale that technology down from 100-ton haulers to 50 tons to, other size trucks, I mean, you could see tremendous change in the coming decades for our industry. I'll skip over that, but I'll talk about safety too, and a little bit about what's developing on the Mine Safety and Health Administration front, just because that's vital to everything that our readers are doing at the magazine. It's not always the most interesting or content. I think about our roundtable every year, and we talk about MSHA, and not everybody's ready to talk about it or willing to talk about it, but it's, again, always of interest because it applies to every mine site out there. MSHA has had a few things going on this year that are of note, or some things that will be coming in 24 more likely. On the rulemaking front, MSHA has been taking a long time to get their rule forward on silica. I feel like we've been talking about that for years, but talking with our partners on Pit and Quarry, we work with a safety and law firm out of Washington, D.C. called Ogletree Deakins. And, our partners there, they tell us that 2024 may be the year where you finally see that rule come forward. And similarly, we may see a rule come forward on mobile equipment, as we've seen MSHA put a little bit more emphasis on powered haulage, what they call powered haulage, with initiatives in the last few years, because that's where some of the accidents have been trending, with either moving equipment or things that are moving within a plant. That's kind of what they define as powered haulage. Interesting development too. I just got, our December issues out the door, and we're going to be putting January out the door here, in the next several days. But I got our latest MSHA column from Ogletree Deakins, and they wrote how MSHA has been under fire a little bit of late from the Office of Inspector General, because they feel like MSHA has been falling a little bit behind on some of the things that they're supposed to be doing. And one of those being rulemaking. Another thing being inspections. MSHA needs to be doing surface inspections for every mine twice a year, underground 4 times. And I guess what the Office of Inspector General found was that MSHA is basically saying that they've been doing all these inspections all along, but I guess they were like 1,500 inspections short, is what our Ogletree Teakins Partners is reporting. So it seems like the fire is being lit under MSHA a little bit. I know MSHA has been understaffed of late, and they've had some turnover and retirements of frontline people. And some concerns I've been hearing from readers is that you've got a lot of people that are coming on to the inspection lines who will be coming on that are not necessarily trained on the things to look for in an aggregates mine. We saw some change on the coal front when coal kind of was under fire, and a lot of coal operations went by the wayside. We saw some inspectors come from coal over to aggregate. So potential problems there, when you don't have somebody necessarily knowing what they're looking at, on a crushing plant or, within an operation. In some cases, I've even heard producers say that they feel like they're educating these operators a little bit, which isn't something you want to see done. So just some things that we've seen develop here in 2023. And I guess maybe the other one I'd mention, just because I thought it was interesting, or an interesting case where MSHA is maybe kind of putting its nose where it doesn't belong. There was a case a couple of years ago where MSHA's jurisdiction was kind of put into question. There was a contracting company called KC Transport that had a maintenance facility off mine property. And at one point, MSHA had come in and cited a haul truck on the mine property. So they'd come back and they were looking for the same truck to see if it had been tended to. And the contractor noted, well, hey, the truck's at this facility off mine property. So the inspector went to the offsite facility, which technically wasn't under MSHA's jurisdiction, but MSHA went there and they cited the equipment as under violation. And so what kind of ensued was this whole case. It went to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia, and they basically ruled that no, MSHA did not have jurisdiction, that maintenance facility was not a mine. And basically what's happening now is the Federal Mine Safety and Health Review Commission has basically tasked MSHA with redefining what a mine is, or what the definition of a coal or another mine, or what a mine is, essentially. So will be interesting, when you think about a maintenance facility, where there's no actual mining take place. I don't know how you define that as a mine, but there's always nuances, I feel like, that we're kind of hearing about from the front lines, whether MSHA has the right to be there or not, or how MSHA is evaluating something or not. I think it's the other thing on the safety front too is, what's happening with accidents. Our industry, when I think historically going back 100 years, maybe some of the greatest gains we've made as an industry, not just aggregates, but all mines, it's on the safety front, because, there's statistics out there that show at the turn of the early 1900s, essentially, up to 1,000 people in some years were dying in mining accidents across the country. And, you saw MSHA form in the 1970s, I think 1977. And,
Yes.
Accidents kind of went down tremendously, in the years that followed. And what we've also seen, in those decades, the 70s, 80s, 90s, is that, safety, companies have totally reprioritized. Now you get to today and, we see that safety is priority number one. But the nature of our operating environments, still comes with risks. It comes with hazards. And it's something too that, Tom Hill at Vulcan was, referencing at that South Carolina show just a week ago, because he was talking about, what's happening on the safety front. These accidents are up nationwide. I think we're up to 38 this year, and we're at our highest point in a decade, which is, it's not where we want to be, obviously, as an industry. But I think we're fortunate that we have, producing companies, contract companies that understand safety and value safety, and they're putting training out there. But it seems like the trend there is that you just have these momentary lapses or losses of concentration. Somebody's operating a piece of equipment and an accident happens. It's just a reminder that it's an everyday conversation. It's training never stops, and I think we're going to continuously be in pursuit of having a year where we have zero fatalities. And This slide just kind of shows the trend with coal. MSHA divides its monitoring or its oversight into coal, and then metal, non-metal, and aggregates falls into the metal, non-metal category. And here we see that's where the majority of the accidents is taking place this year. That's where the majority of the mines are too. But we've seen, if you look back 4 years ago, or excuse me, 6 years ago, you see that jump from 13 and 17 to 26 and 2021, and we're at 29 here already in 2023. So not going in the right direction there. MSHA's certainly aware of this, and I think they're probably going to factor in some things to their rulemaking. Probably more so on the mobile equipment side, as they're evaluating what's happening with fatal accidents in the industry. I know we're kind of coming down to the final few minutes here, but I think this is my last slide or two. So when I think about next year, obviously it's not too far away, and what to expect. I don't expect wholesale changes in terms of the things that are going to transpire in the new year. I almost feel like the storyline for our industry will be similar to what we experienced coming out of 2022 and into 2023. I think it's little changes. I think some things like inflation and mergers and acquisitions, like they're going to continue on their current path in terms of how much is happening or the frequency of those. I think the nature of what's driving aggregate demands can certainly change. What's going to happen in residential? Is it going to be single family that really picks up the slack that multi-families kind of doing right now, and what can help get non-residential projects going in addition to manufacturing? That's what I'll be kind of curious to watch. The election, I think that's always something that is of interest. I think we try to be careful as a magazine to in terms of how we cover that, but always interesting to see what comes forward, as priorities for potential legislation. And then I think the pendulum is always swinging with MSHA as you have a Democrat president or a Republican president. So not sure what's going to happen there. I don't have any predictions, but I think everybody's eagerly awaiting what transpires next November so that they can, make any necessary adjustments and hopefully go forward for the better. Pit and Quarry, we just some shameless plugs for everybody. I mentioned, we're not just a magazine. Again, I've been with Pit and Quarry for 11 years, and my interest has always been, telling stories in written form. I've always been interested, like I said, newspapers and magazines, just putting stories out there in print. And we continue to do that, but we, have our events. We've got a couple of events with one coming up in South Florida in February. We bring the industry together, and it's really a good opportunity for me too, as our editor, to just kind of keep tabs on what people are seeing out there and what's of interest in a lot of these different things that we talked about today. And the Pit and Quarry Hall of Fame returns in 2024 as well. That's something that the magazine launched in 2013. That was a year where we had a founding class that included Mellott's Paul Mellott. He's one of 7 members of our founding class, and we're actually doing the voting for our 2024 class right now, and we should have an announcement on that you can look for in the next couple of weeks. Ceremony is going to be at Ag 1, so maybe we'll see you there. And then I think I mentioned this, well, I can't remember if it was actually on the call here, but we're doing a podcast. Actually, it sounds like some of you heard that last week, so appreciate you drilling deeper, and we're going to be putting out new episodes every 2 weeks. So something exciting, different. Kind of just goes to show that the job's always evolving. I mean, if we were just a print magazine today, we probably would cease to exist. But I think whether you're Mellott or Pit and Quarry or whomever, I think you need to evolve with your customers. You need to evolve with your readers, and that's what we're trying to do with Pit and Quarry. I don't know if do I have any time for questions? I know we're right at 1 o'clock, but
Take a
some
question,
questions. Yeah.
okay.
please.
Sure. There was a question about like strengths and weaknesses for where our industry's at today, and maybe some opportunities and threats. It's a loaded one, but in terms of strengths, I guess I would say I think our industry has proven that it's resilient over the years. As we put together our December State of the Industry reports every year, kind of our year-end recaps for where things are, the state of affairs for aggregates. Things aren't, all the ducks aren't in a row. I mean, we'd like to see inflation get in check. We'd like to see our people shortages or the people problem that we've been trying to manage through for 10, 15 plus years, get solved. But I think our industry always finds a way to find a way. We find a way to hit the marks that we set out at the beginning of the year because we're tough, because we're strong people, resilient people. So I guess that's the strength I would say. I think there's good, money behind aggregates right now. There could always be more, in terms of funding. I think maybe that's an opportunity to better educate our legislators about the need out there for funding, because again, our infrastructure is under, it could use some improvements for sure. I think maybe another opportunity too is just kind of something I alluded to earlier, Rich, when you jumped in, but I think our industry is just starting to kind of get around to promoting the good things that we do. And I mean, I'm 39 years old, but so I didn't experience all this, but I've heard from, over the years from industry leaders just about how we started to value certain things differently. Like you could talk about safety and the value that we put on that, or the value of community relations and working with communities. Well, I think maybe now we're at this impetus too, and this is an opportunity to better promote the things that we do so that we can attract people. And so that at the end of the day, we can get done the things that we need to get done so that we can get more funding for roads, bridges, and highways. I think our industry has so much to offer. And in some ways, I guess you could say we've hid behind the berm on the things that we would call blemishes for our industry. But I think every industry has its warts. Ours does too, but we have so much to offer. We're essential. I think COVID offered a glimpse, in writing in some cases when legislatures and states came out and said, no, like the aggregate industry in some states is essential. I think maybe not in Pennsylvania, but for a while. But I think we're starting to seize this opportunity to talk about the viability, to talk about the essential nature of our products, and that translates into better recruiting people and reaching down, to school age kids and helping communities better understand the nature of what we do, and how we do things safely, and why materials need to come out the door, in every municipality in this country. So I don't know if I answered that question fully or in part, but in terms of strengths, weaknesses, of opportunities, and threats, I think that's what I got. But Rich, I don't know if you have anything to add, but I can leave it there.
We're just really appreciative. Really appreciative of you spending an hour with us and providing this insight. It's exciting. We're excited. I think you'll see a lot of support from us at Ag One, and you've done a great job with you and Rob have done a great job with developing this Hall of Fame as well. And I know Paul's real eager to attend and see many of his friends, and he's just it's something near and dear to his heart as well.
Yeah, it's been exciting to see the growth of that, to see the support surrounding that, and again, yeah, Rich, thanks for this opportunity to visit with everybody today. I hope I left somebody with something of value, and keep tabs on the magazine. Anytime you guys want to hear more from Pit and Quarry, I'm more than happy to visit with Mellott.
Thank you very much, Kevin.
Thanks, Rich.
Have a safe weekend.
You too. Thanks, everybody.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. We're going to be doing it every quarter. We're going to have a keynote speaker, all kinds of information about the aggregate industry. So be on the lookout. Yep.
Jump in the back.